different situation. And so I feel like I'm learning as I go, but a lot of times I'm doing this on my own until just recently. And like I said earlier, I'm really hoping to learn and make connections with everybody else.
Great. And it looks like I'm looking through the chat right now to see where everybody's at. And it looks like we have people all over the place. Like Justin was diagnosed at age 2. And then we also have someone that was diagnosed at age 41. And like Jim was diagnosed at 21. So we've got a lot of different people who've had diabetes for different periods of time. Yeah.
Yeah. Would anyone like to share the experience they had in chat or verbally, how they found out they were diabetic? Did you have some sort of DKA event, or was it some other way?
Yeah, I can hop in here since I was diagnosed at age 2. First off, thank you, Jim or Lisa, whoever invited me via Instagram. Excited to be here. I invited one of my colleagues, Alex Bowden, as well, to join in as well. But I was diagnosed at age 2, so I do not remember what happened at all. My parents said in the 2 weeks leading up to me going to the hospital to find out what was going on was the additional diabetes symptoms, drinking a lot of water, going to the bathroom all the time, losing a bunch of weight. And for a 2-year-old, that's a little abnormal. And they were like, well, we hope he's not dying. So brought me to the doctor, checked my blood sugar. I think they said it was 600, 800, something like that, like well out of the normal range, but nothing insane. And it was, just kind of point blank and something I didn't really interact with at all.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's super interesting because being, mostly an adult, although at 21, I don't feel like I was totally an adult, versus somebody who was 2 years old, the challenge is more pushed onto your parents and things. So thanks for sharing
Definitely.
that.
Yeah, of course.
I can go next if you want me to.
Sure.
I was diagnosed at age 15, and I kind of look at that as a blessing because I was old enough to have the discipline to recognize something was going on, as well as my parents' classic symptoms of excessive thirst and urination and weight loss and lack of energy. Did not have DKA then and never have since, thank goodness. And then I was young enough to not have any really bad habits. So that's where I look at 15 as I think 14 is the most common age of diagnosis, but 15 is right there with it.
Yeah. It's interesting, as a 15-year-old, you were mature enough not to say rebel against it, because I do know some other people that were younger and sort of, went the other way. They sort of didn't take the right path.
Great parental support and MD support. So
yeah,
had a good village around me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Okay, I think I'll go to the next question. Sorry, I'm still getting used to controls. So, what's your greatest sports moment? It doesn't have to be anything like winning a race. It could be just something you're proud of or something you've worked on. Even something you decided not to do because you were type 1 or diabetic in general.
Oh, I can definitely jump in on this one. Sport's been my whole life. I've been racing bicycles professionally for the last 7 years or so now. This was right out of high school. I started racing full time, and then in 2019 signed my first professional contract. Raced on the road for a bunch of years, and last year made a full switch to gravel. But the crowning, I don't want to say crowning achievement, but the highlight in my athletic career has definitely been representing the USA in the Elite World Championship this year, last year, and the year before for USA Cycling, as the first and only male athlete with type 1 diabetes to ever be selected by USA Cycling. I definitely didn't win, definitely didn't do incredibly well results wise, but finished 2 of those 3 world championships and got to race with the very best athletes in the world while also managing type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, that's amazing because it's not easy for anyone, right? Anybody that's in those races is at the end, and everybody's kind of going through similar problems. The only difference is we have to do it as a type 1 diabetic. It adds like several other, levels of difficulty. So yeah, that's super cool. When Lisa said you were joining, I was super excited. So thank you so much.
Cool. Of course, no, happy to be here. I appreciate the invite again.
I can share mine. So for me, one of my things there are tons of things that I feel like I'm super proud of, but one of those that everybody might recognize is I finished in the top 11 of solo riders in the 24 hours of the Old Pueblo a few years ago. And it was one of when I say a few, it was probably like 14 years ago. But the weather was horrendous. It was like 80 degrees when it started, and then it froze and snowed and rained, and the trail froze over, and there were high winds that were blowing people off of the trail. And then as soon as it came the next day, it was 80 degrees again. It was brutal, but also that's kind of my specialty is brutality. So I excelled in that compared to other people. And Lisa remembers it, but I'm sure she doesn't remember as fondly as I do because she was support crew and our setup was just minimal. So yeah, that's probably my thing I'm most proud of.
I could jump in and so Justin invited me, so I been working with him and actually know him through the cycling world. So I raced with Team Type 1 way back in the day, so that's how I knew Justin. But I was even going to say too that outside of just even those accomplishments, I think the coolest thing for me with type 1 diabetes in sports is just the community of people that you end up getting. Like, been doing it for 15, 17 years at this point, and I feel like there's still so many people you stay in touch with that you just, reconnect with so like after so many years. It makes it's life-changing, right? Like all the people who are like, hey, you know what? If we do this, your blood sugars can move here, and here's how we can manipulate it a little bit to be even more successful. I don't know. I think it's not necessarily an achievement, but more of just the community aspect.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it's something I sort of lacked. Partly because I'm a very solitary person as it is, and the type of things I like to do are, 6, 8, 10 hours of riding. Nobody does that. Nobody in their own mind, and they're not going to want to talk or do it. So generally, I'm by myself. So I sort of miss that community, which is something I'm realizing that I want to have. So hopefully, this can be the start of at least a little bit of that. Were you going to say something, Justin? It looked like you were.
Oh, yeah, I was just kind of like finger gunning like green with Alex. That's all.
Alex,
Cool.
you and I have met. Do you remember me?
I was actually just seeing, I was like, man, it's been about 12 years probably, right?
Yes.
The insulin dependence days, I think.
That's right. So I'm going to go in reverse order real quick. Probably my greatest athletic achievement was not even 2 years ago when I did the Appalachian Trail with my teenage daughter. And I will say that physically is one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. When Alex, you mentioned the community of people through diabetes, that's the blessing of having it for 45 years and knowing so many people in the athletic world. I was never somebody that wanted to race other than the fact that I did because I liked it, but I just happened to be kind of good enough at it that I could do well. I did race across America in 1995. I was the first person with diabetes to ever do it on a 4-person team, co-ed team, and it was great. We won. And then I was on the first team type 1 team in 2006. And diabetes has been something that we've all had to manage, and I would say that athletics and being aerobically fit has been the blessing and the people I've met through it. I don't really do it for the competition reason. I just enjoy it and happen to be good enough.
Yeah,
There we go.
I can't even imagine, Pratt, what it's like just logistically to hike the Appalachian Trail as a type 1 diabetic, because you have a lot of things to think about that most people don't think about in a long trek like that. So,
Yeah, the community of the trail, they say the trail delivers, and it's amazing the people on that trail. Unbelievable. Yeah, it's logistically very hard, but doable. You never know anybody that wants to ask.
yeah, that's,
Go slower is my first recommendation.
that's like everything in life, though, I think.
Right. And I've done the 24 hours on the Old Pueblo too.
Cool. Yeah, I love that race. One of my favorite.
Isn't it beautiful?
Yeah, it's so amazing.
A newfound respect for cactus.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Okay, sorry, I keep hitting the wrong thing. So, next, we're going to go into things that are more diabetes related. And one of the things that I've had challenges with is like the inconsistency for me of how things work. So I have a challenge and something that started when I first became diabetic, and that is, how do I release so much control? Like, do I want this to control my life? Because the first 5 years of having diabetes, I spent being super rigid, counting every calorie, doing everything by the book, and it kind of ruined my life. I was 21, so it's kind of brutal to spend 5 years when everybody else is having fun and you're just like doing meal exchanges and things like that. That was before carb counting, before insulin pumps, all that. So, I mean, everybody here, I think, can relate to that in some way. So I try to balance a type A personality with just kind of going with the flow. So what these questions are things that have affected me. And I try to keep them also relatable to everybody, because not everybody does silly things like I do and has similar problems. But one of the things I run into is just consistently urgent low blood sugars after about 6 hours of riding, no matter what I do. No insulin for the whole day, 100 and plus grams of carbs per hour, still low blood sugars. So I'm working with a new doctor on that, and I will talk about that a little bit later. But anyway, here's some of the areas that we're going to go over. Preparation for any activity or event, whether it's racing, training, anything. What happens during the event, what you do for recovery directly after the event, and what happens when things go wrong. So first, one thing I'm interested in is, where do you put your CGM sensor and transmitter? Do you put it in different places based on what your event is, or how do you manage those types of things? So for me, I usually put it on my upper arm or abdomen, because those places are usually the easiest to keep it out of the way. I do lots of mountain biking. I also keep my insulin pump on a chest strap to keep the tubing out of the way. It tends to look pretty weird, but generally it's not that weird. But my new doctor is telling me I should put it on my thigh or whatever major muscle group I'm working most. So have any of you done anything like that? And how do you manage potentially having false low if it's below your lycra or someplace like that?
I've got both my Dexcom and my Omnipod on my hips and thighs pretty much all the time. Just rotate them around. But yeah, I mean, sometimes I get those compression lows at night where you like been sleeping on your hip, and then it's like, oh, I've been 30 all night, even though you really haven't.
And how does that work? Say, again, if you're wearing Lycra or something over that, does it irritate? Does it, because with the Omnipod, that's also the infusion site as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Occasionally, there's a little bit of rubbing on there that kind of like jostles it loose, and I just change it a little faster. But I've learned after the old Omnipods used to occlude all the time, so I used to think I'd lose hundreds of units of insulin every time it would fail. But I learned you could actually just like pull the insulin back out of it.
Mm.
So basically, the solution for me is, if it starts to get sore or not quite deliver as much, pull the insulin out, slap a new pod on, and carry on. Which I realize is kind of the not the most dedicated, detailed response, but more of just the.
No, that's perfect.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I had hoped for. I mean, it sounds like it works well for you. So, I'm sorry if I interrupted you there.
No, I was just coughing.
Oh.
But your question was, where do you put your CGM? I've been on Eversense for 6+ years. Are people familiar with that one? Is anybody else worn one? I wore it in tandem with Dexcom and the Medtronic. I've worn it in tandem with the Libre 3. I swear by it, just because there's no such thing as a compression low. It's extremely accurate. You never have to change your sensor. All you have to do is charge the transmitter. The issue is insurance doesn't really want to readily cover it. Hopefully they'll get there. We probably all remember the days when insurance didn't cover Dexcom either.
Mhm.
Thank goodness they do. But with that one, I've always worn it on my tricep. I know other people have put the Eversense in other places, but I would have a hard time with that because you have to locate the transmitter over the sensor when you charge it or you're replacing the tape. It'd be hard to do that if it's on your butt.
Yeah, you'd have to have someone do it for you.
Yeah. And the tape for me stays on. I can wear the same piece of tape for 4 days, regardless of what I'm doing. A lot of people say they change it every day, which you can, but in my case, it's never been necessary. So I wear it on the tricep. Never had a problem.
I think that's where Dexcom recommends, but I feel like, and this is a little bit of a tangent from what this is, but interesting conversation. And it's one of the things, like, endocrinologists that I've talked to have said that, like, for me, there are different readings based on where it is on my body, especially when I'm exercising. If it's somewhere on my arm and I'm not exercising my arm, like I'm cycling, the readings tend to be either delayed and or artificially low. Doesn't matter whether it's a compression low or not. So that's why my new doctor is telling me to put it on my thigh, because it's going to be a more accurate reading where the blood is going. So these are things, I've been diabetic for 32 years and I've been doing this for a long time on my own. So I feel like I may have gone through some unneeded pain and worry by sort of being isolated. So again, thank you so much for sharing things. This is useful information. One other thing is, for group rides, how do you talk to people about being diabetic? Not necessarily for a race, just any group ride. And so for me, if it's a group ride, depends on the size of it. If it's a small group ride, I'll just tell everybody. If it's a bigger group ride, I'll pick a couple of people and explain to them what needs to happen if I have an emergency. I have one of the nasal sprays for the glucagon emergency kit, and I show them that. I also tell them that, unlike in the movies, just because I'm diabetic and something happens, it most likely does not mean I need insulin. So don't give me insulin. There's something on my little ID that says, if unresponsive, do not give insulin, because I'm worried that everybody's just be like, yeah, here's 100 units of insulin, he'll be all right. Most likely it's going to be low. So anyway, so what do you tell people when you do group rides?
I'd say I'm pretty similar to you in the sense where it's pretty much just telling people about what to do when I'm low, but I'm pretty open about this. Like, anyone that comes up to me and asks me, I'm not necessarily going to prompt someone, but I get questions all the time. I have a tandem pump, so a corded pump as well, and I have it in one of my jersey pockets, so the cord's just out flapping in the wind all day, and I get asked about the iPod in my pocket pretty frequently. So it's a pretty cool learning opportunity, teaching experience for me to tell someone that, oh no, I actually have type 1 diabetes. I'm not living in 2008. And talk about diabetes, and oftentimes it comes up as well, what happens if something goes bad? And most of the time, in a athletic sense, it's going low, and it's my go-to is just get me a soda, because that's usually pretty easy to get at a gas station anywhere. And start saying something funny, start feeling weird, something seems off, either ask me to check my blood sugar, because if I'm too low to check my blood sugar, then like I'm definitely going to need someone to do that. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'm just like acting weird just because that's who I am, and that's normal. So if I won't give you my blood sugar reading, gotta get me some sugar ASAP. But that's about as far as I go. As far as like telling people what to do in an emergency scenario, but as far as telling people about diabetes, that's open book. Anyone that comes up and will give me the time of day, I'll talk their ear off about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting that you leave your tubing out, because I've had so many times mountain biking, because I'm primarily a mountain biker, but in the past, say 5 to 8 years, I've sort of gravitated to gravel, but also it's always like there's things around, and I've had it so many times rip out my infusion set. So I always have it in a little spy belt is what it's called. It just straps around my chest, has a tiny little pouch I can put it in and hang in the front. So
That's smart. Yeah, I've definitely when I'm out mountain biking or take the gravel bike on some of the single track around here, I've definitely had some tree branches get stuck in there, and have had my fair few infusion sites rip out as well. But I always just kind of brush it off and just try and tuck the tubing in a little bit further so it doesn't happen again.
Jim, are you on a tandem as well?
I am, yes. And I'm thinking of, so it's one of the things I didn't bring up with my doctor, but I said, like, I've been diabetic for 32 years. I've been primarily with endocrinologists. I grew up in a small town, and in Phoenix, Arizona, there weren't that many doctors that I could get referred to that I felt like could help me. But here, just recently, in fact, last week, I had an appointment with a new doctor. She is a type 1 diabetic, so she knows directly. She also was in track and field and was a decathlon or pentathlon, whatever the 5-1 is, I think. And she was world class, so she understands all that thing. Her husband is a sports physiologist and understands a lot of how type 1 diabetes affects sports. But they do a lot of cutting edge research. And she's talked to me about not only about different places for my infusion sets, different types of insulin. For me in particular, because I don't need any insulin, I'm still using an alternate pathway, probably burning ketones, although any athlete is going to do that at a certain point. And we're doing it all the time as we burn fat. But anyway, she talked about different ways to work with all those things. So this is probably the most hopeful I've been. Not that I've ever really felt like diabetes is a bad thing. And I actually wrote a blog post about how I think it's one of the best things that's ever happened to me, which sounds twisted maybe. But this is probably the most hopeful I've been ever since I've had it. So I'm super excited for the future. And the reason why I meant saying that, Pratt, is she's recommending a different insulin pump that is supposed to be less reactive and more predictive. Because most of the insulin pumps right now are reactive, and it tends to lead you toward low blood sugars. And for me, that's really bad because I'm always low. So sorry for the long babbling there.
Yeah. Which pump is that?
I don't know. It's one of the lifestyle pumps, I think. She said it's it's going to be out in February. It's still in the last stages of clinical trials and things like that. So it's supposed to measure ketones and blood sugar at the same time. So she said it's pretty transformative in managing diabetes for athletes. So I'm excited for that.
Has anybody else worn the twist pump?
What's that?
The twist pump, has anybody worn that?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get on that now.
I wore that in clinic. You're on it, Jeff?
I'm trying to get on it right now.
Yeah.
I'm
I wore it in
negotiating.
the clinical trials.
What is it?
What's that?
What is it that's different about others?
Well, it takes the tide pool loop algorithm and puts it into the pump. It works with the Libre 3 Plus. It will be working with the Eversense soon. But I use Fiasp insulin, and with the clinical trial, I had to use Humalog and Novolog, and that doesn't work so well for me. So I think once it's it is released, but I've never had the option to use it with Fios, but I was pretty impressed with it. And that's why I was curious which one you were on or going to be using, Jim. But that sounds amazing if it measures ketones.
Yeah, I'll let you know
Wow.
when I find out. So for sure.
Yeah, I'd recommend the Twist. It's pretty slick. The infusion set stinks, but they'll figure that out.
That
I don't know.
algorithm is really good. I think it's the same one. I'm using the Android APS system, which is just one of the open source control tools, and it is life changing compared to the thing you get from Tandem or whatever else, because you can just set so many more like aggressive or not as aggressive predictive approaches. I think until I got back into cycling, I literally did nothing but change my pump site and my Dexcom for like 2 years. Didn't bolus a single time and just let it do everything, and like had an A1C in like 6.5.
That's amazing.
Like
And that works with an Omnipod?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not like FDA approved or anything. So
Well, I know, but who cares?
Yeah, but the G7 is FDA approved, so I don't know if that's a good comparison. The G7 versus the G6 from Dexcom. I wore the G7 and the G6 for a month, and the G7 was almost 100% inaccurate. If I was 100, it said I was 200, always on the high side. So the G7. Anyway, it's a tangent for that as well.
You're keeping me convinced to continue getting my G6 refills.
Definitely, yeah. There's a huge class action lawsuit on them as well for that too, because several people have died because they thought they were high when they were actually low, and they were giving themselves more insulin. So it was sort of pushed through the FDA too quickly.
Oh dear.
Okay, some other things. Thank you so much for this. Hopefully I'm not cutting anybody off. I want to try to keep this in under an hour. But here's some other things. What happens when you have a low blood sugar event when you're riding or racing? So for me, I'm almost always low. I don't know if I'm actually low, but my CGM says I'm low. It's on my arm, so it's probably not accurate, but I will test, and I'm almost always in 50s below when I'm riding or racing or doing a hard workout. So for me, I will always have extra carbs, but that doesn't help any because I'm already eating 100 grams of carbs per hour. So more carbs doesn't necessarily help. So if it's too severe for too long, I will stop for 10 to 15 minutes and let it recover. Or in the case of a few races that I've had, I'll just abandon or just go home. So what do you end up doing with that?
For me, I'm eating more carbs. Like in racing scenarios, lows happen. It's just kind of one of the things we have to take into consideration when we're racing, right? And I've definitely had instances where I've eaten like 300 grams in an hour. It's just purely to avoid going low. Like maybe I took a little too much insulin earlier in the race for carbs in the first hour or two and the race was harder. I just didn't predict it well enough, and my blood sugar just keeps going low. So it's just a matter of like keeping quick acting carbohydrates, almost specifically from both glucose and fructose, to capitalize on both absorption pathways. But I don't want to drop myself out of contention if I'm still able to like stomach the amount of carbohydrates that could potentially get my blood sugar back up into range. And that's pretty much it. Worst case scenario, it ends up like slowing down, making sure that like effort levels are low enough to where all of the carbs I have consumed can like get absorbed and blood sugar can come back into range. But I can't think of an instance in a race where that's happened. That's definitely happened in training. And I've had to like pull over and hang out for a few minutes to make sure blood sugars go back up to where I want. But in a race, pretty much all of the food on me is super quick acting. So it's just shoving as much of it in my face as I actually can.
Yeah, it's funny. I'll ride with people and they're like, dude, you're having another gel? And I'm like, yep. And then like 5 minutes later, you're having another gel? Yep. And my water bottle's got like 500 calories in it too. So like, yeah, I'm pounding the calories. People think I'm weird.
Yeah. No, it's normal for us. So that's nothing weird about that.
Yeah.
Luckily, I feel like I no longer need to stay in contention in races like Justin, which is nice. But I think one thing that I found works really well too is continue eating carbs at the same rate, but just drop down to like a zone 1 type power level for a while. I had that happen a couple times last year as I was getting back into racing a little bit more. It's like, okay, going low means my glycogen seems to be pretty much gone. So let's drop down and see if I can like get some carbs into the system like longer term. Because I feel like, solving the problem right now is good, but if you still have another 50, 70, 100 miles to go, it continues to be that problem. So yeah, dropping down to spend 20, 30 minutes just kind of soft pedaling for a while, keeping things moving so you're not just on the side of the road, but eating as many carbs as you can stomach gives you a little bit of that buffer for later.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's actually a good point, because for me, consistently low blood sugars are what ended one of the 24-hour races I did, where I just kept dropping low enough that my sugar was releasing its stores. And I'm already in a solo 24-hour race. I'm going to need those later. And so that happened to me like 3 or 4 times where I'd like severely bonk, and I was eating like tons of calories, kind of like both Alex and Justin said. It wouldn't come up, and that's why I abandoned, because I'm already doing something silly even for a normal person. So why would I wait, in another 10 hours and see what's going to happen worse? So, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the super endurance events go into a whole different type of fueling strategy, because that's like the longest event I'm talking about and considering is Unbound, which is 10 hours max. And I think once you go over that, then you have to start looking at fuel sources that are not purely carbohydrate as well, especially earlier in the day, to maintain those blood sugar levels. I'm also assuming the intensity level isn't quite as high for 24 hours. Or if it is, that's just insane. But I would assume part of that fueling strategy might also be figuring out a mix of like enough fat and protein earlier in the day to like help void off some of those future like continued lows from the like. That's just kind of what my experience in like longer training days have been, like the training days for Unbound. If I'm in the first third of the ride, if I'm eating foods that have more fat and protein content, I noticed in the last 2 hours of the ride that it's much easier to maintain blood sugar levels without them just like when you're eating super quick acting food, goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down. And if you don't just like consistently have carbohydrates that are quick acting, you're going to drop down. But I found that like having those additional nutrients earlier in the day helped maintain that throughout the duration of these training days, which haven't really made it into the racing side for me yet. But I haven't really needed to consider that as well.
Yeah, definitely for longer rides. And in general, I try to eat real food, because I eat enough gels in my regular life. Like I carry gels around because they're durable, they last, I know how many calories they are, they're quick. So if I ever have a low blood sugar, I don't reach for jelly beans, I have a gel. And eventually they get to be pretty disgusting. I mean, I've probably eaten tens of thousands of gels in my lifetime, which is disgusting on its own. So eating real food is better always, I think.
So Jim, you got a great comment from Joshua. I don't know if you saw that. I raced as an amateur for 5 years and never went low once during a race. My races were never more than 3 hours long. It was always high blood sugar from anxiety plus adrenaline. So the anxiety thing is interesting to me as well.
It is, yeah, and that's interesting, because it's almost the opposite of what I have. I almost never get high, which is the next slide. I almost never get high during a race. And if I do, I won't take insulin, because even the smallest amount of insulin is going to drop me like severely low. So, usually a high will go away for me within 10 to 15 minutes. But if it doesn't, then I have to risk taking insulin and falling back into the same pattern I've had before. So it's interesting the differences between people. So thanks for sharing that, Josh.
Hey, Jim and Justin, just out of curiosity, what are you guys doing with your basal rates on your pumps? Like literally, I have to like basically just turn my basal rate off when I'm out exercising because I'm super sensitive. If I have any insulin on board, I'll drop too low. So I just, if I'm out for 2-3 hours, I'll just shut my basal rate off and I'll still have to eat sugar, right?
Yep. And you know what? I didn't really talk about that because I was worried about taking too much time for this. But when I prepare for, especially a race, I'll turn off my insulin 2 to 3 hours before. So if it's like a shorter training ride, I won't turn it off. It depends. Let me say this also. None of this is 100%. It's like 60%. 60% of the time, I might be close to hitting the target on what I'm trying to do. Generally, this is not the exact call I need. So that's, like I talked in the beginning, is like understanding that you have to give yourself compassion and give yourself some leeway. You can't control everything, and some things just don't work. But generally, I'll turn it off 2 to 3 hours beforehand, and it will stay off the whole time. And I can eat as much as I want while I'm exercising, but as soon as I stop, and there's a slide asking a question about this, I have to take other actions.
Yep.
This is one thing that my new doctor has talked about, is she said even though I don't need insulin, I'm still burning sugar, probably burning fat and producing ketones, which everyone is doing all the time. And she says most of the time, even an elite athlete towards the end of the race has a high amount of ketones. It's normal. I'm interested to learn more of that. And I don't know if I understood it completely, but she said it's just an alternate pathway. And maybe, Carson, you have something similar at times. So
Yeah,
I know I didn't do a very good job of describing that. Sorry.
I might, in response to Carson as well regarding basal rate, I'm both mimicking Jim's approach and also what Joshua wrote in the chat as well. So my blood sugar does go high from adrenaline and anxiety as well. And specifically looking at racing, a lot of times I'm coming into racing fresh. So my insulin sensitivity is relatively low, or like I'll take a normal amount of insulin. I don't know if it's insulin. Yeah, insulin sensitivity would be low, I think. Either way, like I'll be taking my normal amount of insulin at the beginning of a race. Like the breakfast I have before, I'll probably dose pretty aggressively because I know the first 2 hours of this race are going to be pretty intense usually. And the adrenaline from this, the little bit of anxiety that I have going into the race, all of that plus the 100+ grams of carb per hour I'm going to be eating from hour one are going to increase my blood sugar at the beginning of the race. And so at the beginning of the race, I'll still be on normal basal. A lot of times I will take some supplemental insulin for the carbohydrates I eat in the first hour or two of the race. But at a certain point, the amount of exercise has caught up to me. So I don't need to be taking insulin for the amount of carbs I'm eating. And then at a certain point, I won't need any insulin at all. And thankfully, with a corded pump, I can just unplug the pump so I don't get any more insulin. And it's effectively like just no basal at that point. When that happens is very variable, though. And it depends on how hard the race is, how fresh I am, how, like, there's so many factors that go into insulin sensitivity, carbohydrate absorption, how fast you're burning things, et cetera, et cetera. And that is the point at which I stop giving insulin is very circumstantial, but I'd say 95% of the time that happens in a longer race being over 2 hours, 2.5 hours. But prior to that, it's normal insulin plus some supplemental. Like if I have 100 grams of carb in the first hour, I won't be dosing for 100 grams of carb. I'll be dosing maybe at like 25 to 50 of what I need, because I am still exercising and usually exercising pretty hard at the beginning of a race. So I know I need some insulin to make sure my blood sugar is not going through the roof, but not too much to avoid that bottom out. And that's a fine balance that's taken a lot of trial and error, a lot of trial and error.
Yep.
I mean, Justin, you and I have talked about this probably ad nauseum here, but I did Unbound this year as well. Obviously, way slower than Justin did, but I actually spent a whole bunch of time like earlier in the year going like, okay, apparently the new thing is drinking 120 grams of carbs an hour. So how the heck do I do this? You know, and going, I don't have the glycogen capacity for a 12-hour race. And so what was actually kind of interesting is like I found it really successful. And the more sensitive you are, I don't think this necessarily applies, but giving myself actually like an extended bolus over like the first 4 hours of that race, knowing that like I had to eat those carbs. But what ended up happening is like, since insulin prevents your body from releasing glycogen, you know, I had a little bit of those extra stores later on, which meant when, you know, later on, I didn't have those crashing lows that I'd seen in training. You know, if I had a couple of stacked large training days, a couple of days later, I was so much more sensitive to insulin. You know, couldn't keep enough carbs into the system to keep my blood sugars over 80, for example. Right, and it's just miserable to go on a ride or a race and have that happen. So, yeah, it was a lot of trial and error of just like, I found that giving myself a little bit more insulin than I thought I would need allowed me to keep my blood sugars lower during that entire race than I would have like planned for, but just like completely flat. So I don't know, but it was 8 months of like daily trial and error.
Yeah, I find for me, based on my, I can't remember if it was Justin or Carson or Alex or who said it, but based on my freshness is huge. Like my fitness level plays into it a ton. Like if I'm super fit, like I am right now, I mean, it's actually much harder for me to manage, especially during runs. I'm already always low. I just tend that way. But when I'm super fit, I'm just really low. It's so hard to manage. So I feel like I should start I do lots of cross country races as well, but I need to do like shorter races, even like 30-minute races. Then I don't have any worries. Why am I doing like these 24-hour races? What am I doing? It's just causing problems. But yeah, that's interesting. Carson, do you ever have any issues with for longer rides where you start feeling sick, maybe because you haven't had any insulin, and it's not that your blood sugars are any out of range, it's just you feel a little sick to your stomach?
No, I think more of a bonking thing, right? Like maybe I don't have enough on board, but it's this worry of going too low, and then just, you know, as I start to go low, I catch it, right? Like I'm on an Omnipod and Dexcom, typically on the back of my arm, but and it's been the beauty of it, and I just switched to a pump, you know, last year after years of, you know, needles, but I was on a corded pump before, but it's caught me from going low, right? Like it's you know how these between, you know, running a CGM and a pump now, it's saved my butt, right, from going too low for sure. But and I don't do a lot of anything over 3 hours, really. You know, I just well, it's time constraints just for work, but you know, my typical is 2-3 hours, but I'm Jim, I need to probably cut my insulin sooner. Like I've been still playing with it. Like an hour's not enough to cut the insulin. I need to probably try 2 hours before I ride, because what I find myself is, you know, hour into the ride, I'm going low, right? So maybe I need to play with my sensitivity settings as well. But yeah, so still trying to figure this Omnipod out. Right?
Yeah, I think it's like a constant learning process. Yeah, I also, like Justin mentioned, that he eats a big meal and then takes maybe extra insulin. I kind of do the opposite. I turn off all my insulin 2 to 3 hours before. I'll still eat a decent meal. Nothing happens to my blood sugar. I don't get that anxiety spike, which I don't know if that's good or bad, because I'm definitely have anxiety. And then I'll even eat a couple 100 calories of quick acting stuff right before the race starts, and that seems to work great for me. And again, I still don't have any insulin, so
Yeah.
it's
I'm
bizarre.
just any insulin on board. I'll go low. So I have to cut it probably sooner, right? And I have to watch, like, if I eat at noon, it's like I don't want to take any insulin if I'm going to ride, because I'd have to wait at least 3 hours before I ride.
Yeah, I'll actually skip meals because I know I have a ride planned and I don't want to have any insulin on board at all. So I won't eat lunch if I know I'm going to go for a ride at 3, which I know is not ideal, but it's better that than just paying for it later in the ride. So
Can I ask a quick question on the pump stuff there? Like, are you guys using the I guess I don't know if it's considered a loop setting or basically the auto correct, like the control. I think it's Control IQ is what Tandem has, right?
Yeah.
Does it have like an exercise mode? Because I know with mine, right? I have a different profile that I set when I'm going to exercise. So it's like I go from, I think I have it set to 1 unit is 60 points, right? And I bump it up to like 1 to 250 or something absurd, right?
Meaning
So I guess
1 to 60
oh,
milligrams.
MGDL. Yeah.
So you make your sensitivity 1 unit would bring you down 200 milligrams.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that way the auto correction, it's only ever giving me like trickles of insulin throughout that. I also adjust like the carb ratio, even though, I don't really enter that. So I guess I was just curious what you guys were doing there, because it seems like, yeah.
I can answer that. Sorry if I interrupted someone. For me, my normal is at 200. 200 units, or not unit. 1 unit will counteract 200 points of blood sugar. So sometimes I'll move it up to 300-400. But remember, I don't even have insulin on at all. I turn it off when I train or race or any, especially during a race. I'll turn it off. But there are
Jim, I've decided you're not diabetic.
Yeah, it's super bizarre. It's like I don't know if I'd be 1.5, but I don't know what the deal is with that. It's like I don't know if it's any better. I feel like it's worse. It just makes everything super unpredictable for me.
It's just interesting. I think this just shows how unique it is for everyone, because everyone has a slightly different approach and everyone has different sensitivities to both carb intake and insulin intake. And the exact right approach for me is definitely not going to be the exact right approach for Alex. And that's definitely not going to be the exact right approach for you. And there's nuance to it all, right?
So Justin, I had to step out for a minute because my internet crashed. You were saying that you give, you'll eat 100 grams of carbohydrate and you'll bolus for it, but before the race, you'll bolus a quarter of what you would normally cover that 100 grams with?
No, that's after the race starts. Like prior to the race starting, I'm bolusing normal. And like looking at a race, I'm coming in fresh, so my insulin sensitivity is not super high.
Right.
So I need to still be on top of insulin management prior to the race and blood sugar management. My blood sugar also tends to go super high from anxiety, stress, which tend to happen at the beginning of races. So I want to make sure I'm not trending high on the start line, because it's going to be really, really hard.
Okay.
30 minutes to an hour, but I still need to be eating in that first hour as well. And in the first hour, 2 hours, 3 hours of a race, I will be taking insulin, but it'll be, I want to say it's between 25 and 50%. That's generally where it is for the amount of carbohydrate I'm eating, purely to avoid my blood sugar going super high in the first part of the race.
Right.
There will be a part in the race where I stop giving insulin for food, and there will be a part of the race where I just remove disconnect the pump from the infusion site, so there's no basal being administered as well. But that's circumstantial for sure.
Yeah, it's because you have insulin still on board.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just chime in here for a minute. I have never used a closed loop pump other than Twist. I'm on the Medtronic that does not work with Eversense. So I have the Eversense sensor and I do 80% MDI, 20% insulin pump. With Tresiba, which is my long acting, I never change it for exercise. I leave it the same all the time. And that's generally because I'm active all the time. And I don't ever rely on it to bring my blood sugar drastically down. But in all honesty, if I drink and eat conservatively with no rapid acting insulin on board, the Tresiba will get me through pretty darn well. If I'm on a pump, I cut my basal down to 40%. If it's a hard effort in a long training or race, and I do that 2 hours before I start the event, and that, Carson, helps me with that super crash when I first start. But also, Justin, like you, if I don't take enough insulin before to cover my meal or whatever before, I'll have a huge spike too. So I'm kind of in the catch-22 there. If I try not to eat too much before I race, I try not to take too much of a bolus, but it tends to be the same. But I'll suppress the basal 40% and just kind of consume more as I go. But if it's a long suppression at 40%, towards the end of the race, I don't have to eat or drink very much because my basal's been suppressed for so long. Somehow what I've got on, either glycogen stores or something keep me up. With the Twist, I would set the exercise rate. I set it at 120. I would change it 2 hours before I started, and it kept me at 120 the entire time. Didn't have a single hypoglycemia, didn't have any hyperglycemia. And I just drank and ate like I always would. I don't know how it does it, but it worked. And I'm pretty sold on that algorithm, but again, I can't get it yet.
Get the one on your phone.
Yeah, I'm going to call you tomorrow, Alex.
So I think I'm going to skip a couple things maybe. We've gone over a little bit of the recovery parts, which I think Pratt was about ready to get into, and I think people have talked to about as well. And that is, do you do anything special when you recover? Not like the days after, but immediately after exercising or whatever. What do you do? Like for me, I can eat whatever I want while I'm exercising, but as soon as I stop, then my blood sugar shoots up. Mostly because I don't have any insulin on board at all. I haven't had any for a while, and I've been pounding the calories. So I usually will take a little bit of supplemental insulin, but it's touch and go because even a little bit will cause me to be low again. And my the new doctor has pushed me to try to take a little bit extra insulin right towards the end of an activity, which I'm scared to do. So I'll try it, but we'll see. Anybody else have any input on that?
Yeah, I usually do a big bolus right at the end of a big training ride, and then depends on how well my blood sugars are at the finish of the ride. But go shower, because insulin is a good recovery tool, and then it also counteracts that cortisol that starts pumping through your system at the especially after a race. I find that you get to the finish line of the race. I don't care if I've been 100 or 120 the entire day, 300 almost straight away afterwards, right? Just from that finish adrenaline, cortisol, all that. So yeah, for me, it's usually 4, 5, 6 units, jump in the shower, wait till I am almost low, and then go have a recovery drink.
Interesting.
On training rides, I will put my basal back to normal 45 minutes before I end the long ride to get the basal back on board. And like you guys, if I don't do that, or even if I do that, my blood sugar will start to climb like crazy right after I get off the bike, and I have to take a lot of insulin. You know, I think we're all in the same boat there from what it sounds like. I mean, way more than you would ever think you would need to take.
Yes. Yeah. You're like, I just rode for like, 3 to 6 hours. Why am I like needing so much insulin?
You're only diabetic when you don't ride.
Exactly. Oh yeah. I mean, that was one question I took out, but I didn't think it necessarily related to activity, but it does in a way. Is how do you manage being sick? I don't know if we need to talk about it, but it's like an interesting one because, like Brad said, he's always active. So I would imagine you have to handle your long-acting insulin. You might have to up the dosage if you're sick or you're taking a break or whatever. For me, I hated the long-acting because I don't like to make a commitment 20 hours before as to what I'm going to do. Because, sometimes I might do more or I might do less. And I just don't like it. Always was a huge pain for me. So I'm glad that it works for you.
Yeah, I guess I'm lucky.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's a great time to have these algorithms. I have a 3-year-old, so I can't plan 10 minutes into the future. So
Yeah.
Alex will eventually go to college like mine did.
don't tell me that. I'm still holding out hope that she'll stay 3 forever.
So I wanted to keep it around an hour. We're at around an hour and 5 minutes. I could seriously talk to all of you forever. And I've already learned a lot of things, got tons of inspiration, and hopefully I can connect with all of you offline or in another way. I would like to have additional webinars and things like that because, one of the things it's good for us, but I want other people to see that we all have similar issues and that one of the goals of Dirty Freehub is to get other people to see that gravel riding is accessible, and they have a ton of routes on their website that are accessible to anyone. It doesn't have to be like this crazy rage sport. It's something that's super community based. You meet lots of good people. It can be good for anything, not just diabetes. So I'm hoping that people can see these webinars and hopefully not feel alone like I have felt in my life previously. So thank you so much for sharing everything.
Yeah, of course. Thank you guys for putting this on. I also see you guys are in Bend, Oregon.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm probably going to be there in July for Oregon Trail, so make sure I stop by and say hi in person.
Okay.
Linda,
Yeah.
I live in Bend.
Yeah,
Sweet.
yeah, definitely let us know. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
In Bend, Pratt?
I live in Bend.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yep, been here for 16 years.
That's
Portland before that.
Yeah.
Nice.
great.
I was going to say as well, to stay connected, Alex and I have a little Discord group with a handful of other type 1 diabetics that we're doing under our InStride type 1 diabetes brand that we have going on. And this is kind of like it's talking about anything and everything, type 1 diabetes, tech, sports, questions or not. And we can throw you guys that. Actually, I think Alex just threw that link in as well. So
Everything you guys have been saying, I was like, man, we need to keep these conversations going when the questions come up.
Yeah. Because like I said, I have a million questions and a lot of them are related to problems that I face. And I hope that, I don't hope that other people face them as well. I mean, that sounds bad, but I hope someone else can give me like ways to, new things to try. So,
I mean, we've all got diabetes, or maybe not all of us in here have diabetes, but we're all going through similar challenges at different degrees and different aspects, and being able to talk with people that either have experience or have partial experience in that can offer a lot of insight and just new things to think about, new criteria to think about, to consider in whatever scenario or event or goal you're planning. That's kind of our goal with our group and with InStride, and something that I'm very passionate about talking about, and can also talk about this for as long as the sun's up and down and back up again.
yeah.
Alex, are you still at 8431?
I am.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, this is crazy. I was like talking to Justin just before. He's like, hey, can we postpone the chat that we already had? I want to jump on this. Do you want me to? And then see Pratt in there. I was like, wow. But
I'm eating an El Sancho. Linda, you'll appreciate this.
Dang, that's cool. That's Linda just posted a ride and said she was out for Taco Tuesday, and I said those are real tacos, not like the Oregon tacos, because it's hard to find good tacos, but El Sancho is pretty good for that. So
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate you coming, and thanks, Jim and Lisa, for making this happen. It's really inspiring me as well, being a non-diabetic, but the challenges you guys face are really incredible. It's amazing that, you have to think about all these things and ride a bike at the same time. So it's really inspirational for me personally. So good night, everybody.
Thank you all.
thank you
Awesome.
all. Nice meeting
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
Night. Nice to meet y'all.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.